For early access plus exclusive content, facilitated discussions, live one-on-one Q&As, and more, become a patron at patreon.com/BrucePointset. Hey everyone, it's Bruce, and today we're talking about, or continuing our discussion really, on civic engagement and just political infrastructure. And I have a special guest with me here, Esperanza Tervalon-Garrett, CEO and founder of Dancing Hearts Consulting. Esperanza, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm talking about my favorite stuff, civic engagement, power building. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I think, these are really the necessary conversations we need to have, and just kind of getting to what this work really means and what the possibilities are with this work. And I've just been, I was telling you off camera that we've had connections tangentially. For my other series I do, the Black Tastic Adventure, I interviewed some of Dancing Hearts consultants who also do So Black organizing in Southern Oregon. And then also I follow We Draw Oregon a lot. So, I always feel a little bit familiar with Dancing Hearts, but it's nice to, interview the head of the head of the snake here. So for starters, could you talk about what Dancing Hearts does? And I know you formed in 2017.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, sure. So Dancing Hearts Consulting is a Black woman-led consulting firm. We really work with kind of two main audiences. We work with folks in progressive philanthropy who are trying to figure out how to resource Black, Indigenous, people of color-led work. Mostly around civic engagement, to be honest. A lot of our work is with C4s, which we'll get into in a minute, and C4 funders, to really figure out how can extractive philanthropy that has made all of its money on the back and work of poor people, Black people, brown people, Indigenous people, and our labor, how can they use their money now for good, to help us build power and to build more racial justice into the work that they fund. So we work with people in philanthropy, and then we work with social justice organizations. I come out of social justice movement. I'm actually the child of movement people, I'm a movement kid. And so we work with social justice organizations to help them figure out how they want to build more power for their communities. And one of the ways is through this C3, C4 PAC power building model. And so we've been doing this for a couple of years. It has really been exciting to be here in Oregon and to be able to offer this. I think we're one of the few Black women-led firms in the state, and certainly bring a really strong commitment to racial justice and to making sure that people of color here are centered. They're the starting place for all of our work.
Yeah, and that's, again, just from following So Black and We Draw Oregon, I think that is really, really the power that comes from what you're doing, is just being able to do it with, for lack of better terms, force, and being very intentional, both in the language and how you move. And, even I was going over the website today. I thought one of the things that just kind of caught my eye is you have on the Who We Are page, we hate meetings. I'm paraphrasing to be clear. We don't like those meetings that could be emails either. So we make meetings magical. Not to divert from talking about the 501c4 part, but can you just go off about that? Because a lot of us have that feeling.
So, I started in this work when I was 30 years old. I was an executive director. I started much earlier in the union, but I started leading a C3, C4 PAC. I'm the first Black woman in the country to run a C3, C4 PAC focused on turning out voters of color. And we were collaborative. So we would have these meetings, that were they could have been emails. And I think people kind of joke about that. And, as I've been in leading organizations for about 15 years now, in different capacities, I think the truth of the matter is that how we run our organizations is a reflection of the kind of culture we have. And, my experience was that I'd be in these meetings and they take all my time. And then you have to leave the meeting and actually do work. And by the end of the day, I was like, of course I was working 80 hours a week because I was in these shitty meetings talking about nothing that was actually just directional, not actually building relationships, not actually talking about power, not actually like getting smarter or sharper, and just wasting my time. And so one of the things I'm famous for is like facilitating meetings that don't suck. And literally when people are like, we would like to hire you, I'm like, I'm super expensive facilitator because I'm going to give you a meeting that people actually want to come back and do again. And I don't ever want anybody to have to suffer another meeting that should have been an email. I don't want to do that. And part of what we do here at Dancing Hearts is like, we just do the shit that we want to do. Everything we do is super Black. It's like, I don't make any apologies for coming with my full self. We show up, we make it funky. We always have a playlist. There's always a graphic. Like we have to entertain ourselves too. And so we just try and remember that people are people and we could all be doing a lot of shit. And if you have to come to work, you have to do a thing, like at least make it fresh,
Amen. And I think that's really so needed here in Oregon. I know you're originally from Oakland, California. I'm just curious, when did you move to Oregon?
That's a good question. My wife and I bought our home in Ashland right after Trump got elected. So like, I think we knew kind of that summer that we thought we wanted to move to Oregon. We got priced out of Oakland, which I'm born and raised in Oakland. And my wife had been there for 20 years and we just couldn't afford it. People are paying $800,000 for a 912 square foot home. And we were like, that's not us, homie. And so, we found this 16-acre property in Southern Oregon and we moved there in the spring. Like, I think we moved into the house like in March of 2017. And I knew as soon as I got here, I was like, this place is dope. Like, I love the nature. I love the vibe. I thought it was a lot more progressive than it really turned out to be, which is fine. It's all good. It's all good. But I don't think you can beat it. Like the nature, the air, the quality of education here. I know it's, racial disparities really make it tough for kids of color, but the quality of education is still so much higher than where we came from. And ultimately, for us, I know you talked to Keith and Precious from So Black, which I helped to found. For us, community is what you create. And so, our experience in Oregon has actually been more Black than maybe when we were in California. It was very multiracial because we have to really create this Black community around us. And so most of our friends are Black. Most of the community that we build is Black. And so we're still having a very Black experience here in Oregon. Which I do think is unique, but one that we've had to cultivate just for our own preservation, just to like feel good. But I guess we've been here for almost 5 years. And about a year ago, that's not true. Yeah, earlier this year, we bought a house in Bend. And so now we're in Central Oregon, which I also love. And I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, and I've interviewed some people out there in Bend too, doing relatively new, but, also very Black-centered work. So it's really, I think what you speak to there is just like, on one hand, Oregon, there's no doubt, Oregon has a lot of baggage, has a lot of stuff, but also in that there is a lot of opportunity and just to, again, like you said, like create this community and really, just take advantage of, some of the stuff that those of us who've, just grew up here kind of take for granted, just like the nature, the clean air, So it's, like I said, just the opportunities are there. It just, it takes the work, it takes the intentionality, which kind of brings me to, talking with you about the difference between 501c3s and 501c4s. And, I can already see some people watching this being like, just rolling their eyes at,
I know.
The bureaucratic minutia, but it's actually really important. I think there's frankly, just a lot of frustration and apathy towards the idea of the nonprofit industrial complex in Portland area, but in Oregon in general. And I think a lot of that kind of comes from one, just feeling like there's a limitations or that, like you really stress like being Black centered, Black controlled, Black owned. And the difference between having, this idea of like, where it feels like others are kind of, steering how we navigate our own empowerment. So with like C4, well, one, let's just bring it back to And Dancing Hearts is a C4, correct?
We're an LLC. We don't even
LLC.
have to deal with any of that. We're a straight up business. We can do whatever we want. I can work on a candidate. I can do whatever I want. But we do support C3s and C4s, which
Okay.
I'm happy to like break down a little bit.
Yeah. Could you just kind
Yeah.
of describe the difference?
So the first thing I'm going to say is what I always say. I have a whole training about this, and it's called "I am not a lawyer," because I'm not a lawyer. And what we're about to discuss are actually legal tax. They're tax formations for organizations. So the 501c3 is actually, and C4 are both tax statuses. These are about how organizations are able to receive and spend money and what the tax allocation is. So how much tax you have to pay on it. So a 501c3 is a charitable organization. So what are some charitable organizations that we know? Like a church is a 501c3. Some of the service organizations that you know that like help people like homeless shelters often are 501c3s or can be 501c3s. The food bank is a 501c3. So this idea of like service organizations that are just doing good, And if you're a 501c3, you don't pay taxes on the money that you bring in. So people donate to a 501c3 and they don't have to pay taxes. That organization doesn't have to pay taxes on that money, right? But there's a hitch. If you're a charitable organization, you cannot have any political purpose. You can advocate for big ideas like just go vote, get out and vote, participate as part of your civic duty, but they can't tell you things like who to vote for. They can't get involved in any what's called partisan politics. So that's talking specifically about Democrats and Republicans, or Democrats or Republicans or libertarians. You can't get any of the party conversation. And the benefit is that donors get to write that donation off. They actually get to get money back from the government or write it against their tax bill at the end of the year. So it's a 501c3. I'm not going to totally complicate it because there are some conditions under which a 501c3 can do some lobbying, but let's separate it out for a second. So 501c3 is a public charity. They do community education. They do service. And they actually play a really important role in our communities. Your church is a 501c3 like that, and to be honest, churches are the biggest individual donor vehicle in the country. That's where most of our small dollar donations come from, our churches. 501c4 is a different tax status. This tax status was created so that public service organizations could have an opportunity to support what's called lobbying. And lobbying is the process through which we talk to decision makers, either elected leaders or what's called grassroots lobbying, which is like people who are making the decision, which is sometimes considered voters, right? When we have to vote on a ballot initiative, it's actually all the voters who are the decision maker. When things are getting passed through the legislature, that's elected decision makers. The ability to lobby is to say, I have an opinion about what you should do, and telling people that opinion is lobbying. Whenever you do lobbying, that money, that resources, that work, you do have to pay taxes on that. That is not that has an opinion. It has a perspective, right? That organization is going to do more than just a service good. They're going to push us in one direction or the other. These organizations are kind of funny. They actually have two purposes. 51% of the time, or the majority of the time of a 501c4, has to be spent doing 501c3 like work. Education, organizing, service, it's the same as a 501c3. But up to 49% of their time can be spent doing lobbying. They can do partisan work, so they can actually work for a candidate. They can say, yes, we're going to support the Democrat. We're going to oppose this Republican. And all of their time can be spent lobbying, talking directly to decision makers, either in the legislature as elected officials or grassroots, just talking to voters during voting time. So these two organizations, so, when I started doing 501c3, C4 work, people were like, I don't understand. I don't know what you mean. And the truth of the matter is that 501c3 work, while really effective in places like a food bank, where there's just like straight up, we're just helping people survive, or places of faith often where people are like, this is where we get our spiritual nourishment. in organizations that are organizing people to have power or to really more engage with their life from a place of empowerment, people were being hamstrung. I ran an organization that was a C3, and we would do get out the vote, and people would be like, get out to vote for what? And people were not voting in their interests. And I think early on, my organization and others now are deciding we actually do need to have an opinion, and we need to be having a rigorous conversation with our communities about politicians. Who should we vote for? Why are we voting for this? Once we vote for them, what do we expect them to do? How do we hold them accountable? I think a lot of times people love to talk about accountability. Oh, we're going to hold them accountable. Well, I think people hate this about me, but also I'm like a truth teller about this election's work. There's one way to hold an elected official accountable. They either do what you want or you replace them. Anything else is just foolishness. That's not actually how power works. That's not how this game works. And so organizations that are trying to figure out how to really reshape the political ideology, the direction of our policy, they don't just want to come in and say, please, please, please do this. They want to say, we want to do this. Here are the elected officials we're going to run, who are going to take this to the legislature and move this. If they don't do it, we're going to talk to the voters, and we're going to find somebody else who will do it. And I think in a place like Oregon, that I like to call is like Oregon nice, where y'all like play this nice game, but it's not nice at all. That's a new orientation of politics here. That's just a whole new game. And mostly Black, Indigenous, people of color organizations are picking this up with a fury right now, thanks to some funding here in Oregon and in Washington that's been coming to the state to help 501c4s get the money they need, which is hard to find because there's no tax write-off, to be able to do this work at scale and really claim like, what is it that we want for our people, and how do we get there? How do we get to have a voice in this process that's legal and fine, and not like, there's nothing illegal about that, as long as you have the C3, C4, as long as you understand these two vehicles and use them properly.
Yeah, and what you said about this being a new game really in Oregon, it just reminds me, I'm a member of Imagine Black up here in Portland, and I went to an endorsement meeting for the school board where, they were just going over just interviews for each of, the candidates, like Black candidates they had selected, or actually no, it's all, all the candidates who were willing to do interviews with them. Some didn't, and that's right. A very telling data point. But anyways, they did interviews with the candidates. They covered very specific issues. They had, graphs and charts to really, and went through with us as the members, what are our thoughts on this? And I was just so impressed by the thoroughness of the process, because I'm used, as an Oregonian, I'm used to this situation where, someone will run as like, I'm the first this person, but the entire infrastructure behind them is the same, mostly white-led, white constituency, as far as like who they're really responsive to, kind of infrastructure. And then what happens is someone will run on their identity, and they can push that into office, but once they get there, like you said, who are they actually accountable to? It's not us. It's not who they ran or who they ran as, and you get the same results. So yeah, it's refreshing to be able to actually have an accountability process, have some thoroughness to it. And I think, again, that's part of the reason we're doing this interview, is just to shine light on why that's so important and help steer people to be a part of that process. Because again, there's just so much apathy and so much frustration over the years of seeing, just no action, seeing the same dance, for lack of better terms.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting question, because what happened here in Oregon, I feel like I'm so honored to like have been a part of. There are a couple foundations who converted to C4 funding, and then had like a bunch of process where they brought a bunch of us. I came in early, like maybe 4 years ago, before I moved here, 4 or 5 years ago. They brought me up and they said, well, will you tell people your story of what you did at Oakland Rising? And I said, yeah, of course, like no problem. Like I love to talk about things. And people were like, you got the first Asian American mayor elected in Oakland? And I was like, yeah, she won by exactly the number of votes that we turned out on election day. And people were like, like it just was so beyond, and people started to share that the elected officials love to bring people out for a photo op. They love to have the Black people lined up and the Latino folks lined up and the Asians are all lined up and they want them in the photo op, but they don't actually do anything. Everything that Latino folks and Black folks want, they have to push the whole time. And I said, this doesn't make sense to me. Why are you helping people get elected who you then have to push to do the shit you wanted to do in the first place? That is not power. You are playing some weird game that's super white supremacist, that actually is not rooted in your liberation. This is rooted in an extractive transactional democracy that doesn't represent us. It doesn't represent our interests, and you should not play this game. I'm not saying that you shouldn't play in this realm, but this is not the game. And so we've been having these, I've been so fortunate to work with organizations who want to have a conversation about how to reset the table so that this whole democracy game is happening on our terms. We're setting the conversation about defunding the police. We're making them come, we're inviting them to come and tell us what they want to do about policing, what they want to do about education, what do you want to do for Black people? And people will say, oh, but you're only 2%, you're only this and you're only that. But that's not actually what power is about. It doesn't matter if we're 2% or not. If we're 2% and we all vote, that's a problem for you because we're swing voters. Now, an election is won by 4 to 5% of the vote. You have a 2% majority that will swing one way or the other. You've got a problem. It's not actually the 50,000 votes you need to worry about. It's that 250. And so that's just like understanding how politics work and then just recasting the game so that we are situated. We're telling them the argument. And I think for a lot of organizations here, what's been fun to watch is like, you gotta say it, then you gotta put up. And I think because the culture here is not like as combative as say the Bay Area, where we're just like, what you want to do? People have had to like step into their own and really prove on election day that they can turn out the API vote, that they can turn out the Black vote, and people have been doing it. And Imagine Black has been killing it, right? Like even the work we did with the census, you see this rise in the total number of Black people. And people are like, oh, there are Black people here. When the story was that we were leaving the state, this wasn't a Black state. And I'm not saying, we're no Mississippi, my friend, but but that doesn't mean that Black people aren't living here and that Black people should have a voice in whatever's happening on whatever level. And I think C3s are important. And this new emergence of C4 work is allowing people to really play with what does democracy look like in Oregon when we lead it in alignment with what we want for our people.
Yeah, and I think what really excites me about it is just beyond, turning out the vote in, president elections, getting people who will actually fight in office, just what it can do as far as developing, that bullpen coming up. As far as a lot, again, when we talk about that apathy, I think a lot of people, because they've just been through the game, they do need a little bit more, I guess, just direct what's the word I'm looking for?
Attention.
Direct attention, being able to see, having people who are going to, it kind of gets, it feels like a cliche to say you're just gonna, speak plainly to me, but really like having people be honest, having people be forceful, and knowing that, because the question always comes, I get it as like a media person and some of my other friends in like media, people will ask us, so when are you running for office? When are you, and part of me understands, okay, I talk this talk, there's going to be that. But also part of me is saying, I think the apprehension someone like myself has are, other people who may not be as, I guess, the face out there are like thinking, okay, if I run for office, who's going to be supporting me? What's going to be behind me? Am I just going out there to, again, like you said, get elected and then have to fight tooth and nail for anything that's actually for my community? So being able to see this infrastructure, being able to see people not just changing this narrative behind the scenes, but also very publicly, I feel like it's going to go a long way towards, inspiring those people who, could be the next city councilors, mayors, state senators, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, it's so true. And it's so interesting to me because I don't feel like there's so many talented people of color in this state. It's actually like really impressive. We always struggled in California to find people who could like actually handle a run and raise the money. And I don't feel like that's our problem here in Oregon. We have really talented, smart people of color who get the politics. People don't generally know how government works, but that's everywhere. People just don't actually, like, nobody went to civics class. Everybody cut that class. Everybody was smoking weed outside in the hills or whatever, enjoying the nature. Absolutely zero people went to that class. And the impact is that people don't know how this all works, but that's teachable. That's like a little, you can learn it as you go, or you learn it in on the job. I think what's not teachable, what's harder is trying to figure out how do we vet people early. Because what happens, or my experience, I've worked for all kinds of people. I've gotten Congress people elected. I've worked for Congress people. I've worked for presidents. I've just been in politics for a long time. People are kind of shaped by the people around them. And once you get into government, you have a lobby that's coming at you. You have here we have a timber lobby. We have a fossil fuel lobby. You have lobbies you didn't even know were a lobby. The business lobby. You have, here there's like the education athletics stuff is its own lobby. Like schools have lobbies. Everybody has a lobby. So who are the lobbyists for the people? People of color. It's these C4 organizations who can step in and really be our lobby for the issues we care about. And I think our work, to be honest, is to figure out how do we as leaders, or just people who care, go into this process with C4 organizations, participate in their programming, show up for their things like you went to the endorsement. How do we feel emboldened by that and figure out how to actually be vetted and rooted enough in those organizations to then step out and say, I'm ready to take this leap. And have the support to do that. I don't know that people of color have ever had, I don't know that organizations here have been strong enough to provide, organizations of color have been strong enough to provide that wraparound support, but we've seen that from organizations like Planned Parenthood have done that with white women for forever. Emerge has also done that with white women, increasingly women of color, but really with white women for forever. So white women and white men have had that embracing, they've had that support. The rise of C4s in Oregon mean that people of color are now beginning to have those, what we call like political homes or political institutions that can wrap their arm around and say, we'll make this promise to you if you make this promise to us. And I think ultimately the thing that is hard about politics for just everyday people is that this is a transaction. We do not have transformational government in this country. That's not what we have. We have a transactional government right now. That can change, but right now it's transactional. And so the question has to be, what are you willing to move, to fight, to advance, and how can people show up in that process with you? And I think that we have a lot of really good folks who are doing that. I mean, Akasha's like dope. She's unapologetic. She's out here like letting people know. She's an amazing representative. And I think, she's got a lot of promise, and I think that is getting more people who want to step up, and then having these organizations who can step up and support that move. I will also say running for office is not for the faint of heart. I also get the text. I just got one. They just released the maps and somebody said, you ready to run for Congress? No, honey. No. And there's nothing, it's not that I don't want to be a servant for the people. I think that there are certain people who play certain roles, and, your role in media and community, we need Black people telling our stories. We need Black people making space for us to have different ideas and to really show the breadth of who we are as people. And I think similarly in this political space, until there are more people who can get on and do this interview, my work here is not done,
Yeah. Well, one, thank you for making me feel a little bit better about my apprehensions, but also Esperanza, thank you again for taking the time and, really breaking down. Again, we'll emphasize you're not a lawyer.
No.
So, for more information on the difference between 501c3s and 501c4s, do
Boulder Advocacy. Boulder Advocacy is an amazing, I think they're a 501c3, and they I don't work for them. I don't nothing with them, but they are a great resource if you want to learn more about how 501c3 and 501c4s work or how to fund that work. They've recently put out a couple of cool guides, and boulderadvocacy.org, I believe, is where you can find all their stuff. They're just such a valuable resource to understanding the difference. And, you know, as always, if you're interested in trying to build more power and you just want to talk with folks who do this work, you're always welcome to reach out to us at win@dancingheartsconsulting.org.
Got it. Yeah. So with that, again, thank you again for your time. Again, check out dancingheartsconsulting.org and to follow everything that the organization is up to, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks for having us. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for watching. Please like and share and subscribe so you can stay up to date on all of the latest videos. Thank you.